and today we're delighted to be joined by Kathryn Coster, who is the creator of the Innerspiration Values Cards. So thanks for joining us, Kathryn.
Thank you for having me.
It's fab to be here. So as you may know already, the Innerspiration deck is one of those that's available on the Deckhive platform. One of a number of cards in the card decks in the library that you can use when you're working with people in a remote way, whether that's one-to-one or in a group session, and you want to have a deck of cards that are almost like the physical real versions that we used to use back in the day, but an on-screen equivalent that enables you to facilitate valuable conversations with people that you're working with. So the aim of today's session is to get a bit more of an understanding about what the Innerspiration Values Cards are all about, how they came to be, a bit about Kathryn's background and her journey to creating this fabulous deck of cards. So we'll ask a few questions as we go through. Michelle will be primed, ready to drive the Deckhive session, so you'll be able to see some of the cards we're talking about as we go through. But if you have any questions as we go through the session, then feel free to add them into the chat, and we'll either cover them off if there's appropriate opportunity during the session, or we'll have a Q&A slot before we finish, so we can make sure we cover those things off at that point. Okay, so welcome again, Kathryn. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us. So
Thank you.
It'd be good to hear a bit about background, really. I guess, so what's your story about how did you get to this point?
Well, I mean, I'm a kind of prime recipient user of these cards. They're basically a tool I designed to help myself, really. I'm probably like a lot of you on this call. I've got 2 kids. I've got a husband. I've got a cat. I've got a house. I've got a full-time job. I've all kinds of things. I've got school admin. I've got hobbies and friends and trying to keep fit and eat well and do all that stuff. So I feel like I'm juggling a lot of things all the time. And although I've been in a fairly steady job for most of my career, I've moved around a little bit, and I try lots of different things. You name a hobby, I've probably tried it. Aerial hoop, salsa dancing, all kinds of things. I've tried side hustles, selling things. Just really, I like to try new things, but I've ended up sort of barreling through life without sometimes sort of vision and purpose, really, and sort of like hurtling from one thing to another. And probably like some of you and the clients that you have, you sort of lose sight of what it is that is you and what you want to do and the things that you think that you should do. Like, so one really key example is volunteering to be chair of the PTA. I mean, I don't really know why I did that, except I like being in charge. So leadership is a value for me. But I like organising things. I've got a really bad memory. I do a zillion other things, and I really like to have free time and space to read and just sit around and play around on the internet. So I don't know why I volunteered to do that. This was one of those things that I just said yes to because I couldn't tell whether it's something I wanted to do, or I thought I should do, or I thought other people would like me more if I did those things. So that's really sort of where I am now. And it's really only in the past sort of few years that I've really managed to narrow down the things that I like to do. And I have a bunch of social media sort of handles, and like I always say, I'm a reader, runner and writer, and at the moment those are my core thing. And ask me in 2 years time and it'll be like I'm a yoga teacher and it'll be something different. But I've really tried hard to narrow down and only say yes to the things that I really like to do. One thing that always has been really core for me that I sort of had a bit of an epiphany about probably about 7 years ago was psychology is a real core thing for me. So I discovered psychology when I was 18, and I picked psychology A level and I just fell in love with it. I did a degree, I did a master's degree, but then sort of fell a bit out of love with university and studying and left that for a while. And then, I realized that in all of the jobs and all of the, again, at work, I was always a real victim of like having side hustles. There'd be the things that were my job to do and the things I did under the radar that I just wouldn't tell my boss that I was getting involved in because I just didn't want to do them. And they were all about people and behavior. And I realized how much I loved psychology. And so I went back and I did a master's degree, another master's degree in occupational psychology. And again, it's one of those things, like, I don't know why. I had a 2-year-old. I don't know why I did it, but there's some sort of like desire for achievement and attainment and learning's a real core value for me. But I have realized that psychology and people behavior is something that's really core to me, and everything that I do centers around that now. So it's taken me a surprising, for someone who's got 3 degrees in psychology, it's taken me like 35 years to sort of figure that out.
Yeah.
So
And so with the creation of the deck of cards, was that just kind of one of these kind of ideas that just crossed your mind that you
it
just
was
ran with?
exactly that. It was exactly when the idea of the cards wasn't. I was in a job where I was doing a lot of teamwork and facilitation, and I wanted to do some values exercises with teams, because values are really great for teams to send. You have personal values and team values. And I looked into some exercises, and most of them just give you lists, pick a list. And I don't really like lists. And I'd dabbled with cards before, like I'd had the At My Best cards, and I've tried other different cards. So I thought, well, I'll try a card like exercise. And so I made like a prototype, laminated it and cut them all out and got some pictures. And it was really good, and I really liked it. And the team that I worked with really enjoyed it, and I tried it with a few more teams. But the thing that was the kind of like, I know, let's try another thing, was I'd been looking at Kickstarter a bit at the time. And I'd done a bit of innovation work in my organization, and what I'd learned about the innovation, and this may seem obvious now in 2021, but I guess 5 years ago, innovation was all about technological innovation. It was all about computers and digital and stuff, and I wanted to experiment whether I could apply that sort of innovative thinking to people stuff, to the stuff that people who are in those arenas call pink and fluffy. And I did some of that work, and that really gave me the impetus to think, this Kickstarter business, and I don't know how much you know about Kickstarter. It's a crowdfunding tool. So you have an idea, you prototype it, and instead of you investing a lot of money and then hoping it sells, you pitch it to people, and they will pledge a bit of money for a product, and you get all that money up front, and then you can use that money to create your product, and then you send it out to them. It's a really great way of generating investment. And yeah, that was my real kind of like, here's another thing that we should do. And it was a lot of hard work. And again, it was a bit of a tick in the box. I've done a Kickstarter, and I've designed a product. I really enjoyed the design part of it. So I did a lot of research around design, branding. My husband helped me. I found pictures. I use a really excellent website, which I recommend for everyone, called Pixabay, which has license-free pictures, and they're really, really excellent photography. So I use those. It's a lot of research. Learn about storytelling, how you pitch your product, how you sell them. The story is really, really important. So I learned a lot of stuff from doing it. But yeah, it was just another example of, here, you have 15 things to do and children and a house. Why don't you try another product?
Well, let's have a look at what you created. So if Michelle shares her screen, we'll be able to see some of the cards laid out on a Deckhive session. And so do you want to just talk us through kind of what people get when they kind of have a deck of these cards in their hands, as it were, or on screen? What's included and what's the structure to it?
Yeah, so I have a set in my hand. I've been playing with them here, and so there's 52 values cards, and then in the physical deck you get some sort of instruction cards, and on Deckhive, I think it's on the sort of landing page. There are some instructions on how to do things. So basically, there's 52 cards with value words on them, on one side, and pictures on the other side, and they look really super simple, and that was really, really deliberate. I researched values cards, and there weren't a lot on the market at the time. And one of the ones I found on the market had definitions of the values. And I quite like that, because I love a bit of semantics. But the problem with that is that's really it's really restrictive. So I really just wanted something that was really simple, that had a primary use, but could also have like a kind of like a secondary use if you need it. You could just use the pictures on their own. You can use the words for values, but you can also use them to talk about other things, about how you're feeling, check-ins, those sorts of things. So I really wanted something that was really simple, and not trying to put too many functions, but just really flexible and simple.
And the imagery is really striking, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, good point. The imagery is tenuously linked to the cards. I can't remember how you do it on At My Best, whether you have yours linked, but I did. They are linked in my brain, but really it almost doesn't really matter what the words are, the pictures are. They're there as a sort of stimulus. So you can pick a card, and if you're coachy is struggling to understand what, say, where like reliability means to you, and that's the one underneath it, you could pick the word reliability and you can say, okay, I'm not really sure what this means. So you can look at the picture and what's on the side of reliability. Well, for me, there's like kind of like a sturdy peg there, security and safety, and something that's been there for a while and it's going to always be there. And that's the conversation you can have. And someone will go, well, that's not what I mean by reliability. That picture doesn't speak to me at all, which is fantastic because it's all in the conversation that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about why it's important, and you talked a bit about your own values, or the hunt for your own sort of values and purpose in what you're doing, but why do you think it's important to kind of explore values in this way, and why this way versus other ways?
Well, I think values are really, really important. They're basically the principles that we hold true, but we often find it difficult to kind of identify them in ourselves and articulate them within ourselves because they're so ingrained in us. And some of them will be things that we're born with, that our brain just creates for us. Some of them will be values that are instilled in us from our parents, or from what we learn, or from what we want to not do from them. But because they're so really deeply ingrained, we don't always identify what they are. And sometimes I think it's really difficult for us to understand that other people's are different as well. Often when you get conflict, and people feeling things are unfair or not understanding other people, it's because it really hasn't occurred to them that the person in front of them just doesn't have the same value as them, and that's completely okay. And so we don't realize that they're not universal, that our 5 values or even top values are not, mine aren't the same as yours, Martin. And I think when we really recognize our values is when we're really super excited about something, or when we're upset or cross or frustrated. That's usually a real symbol about what our values are. So just for 30 seconds, have a think about the last time that you really got frustrated, so furiously frustrated, the red mist descended. What was going on for you? Was it that someone pushed in front of you in a queue? So there's a real kind of like, that's just not fair and it's rude. Or was it someone just wasn't kind, or someone didn't follow through on a promise for you? So you really value kind of reliability and integrity. It's those moments that seem a bit irrational, where you're getting really cross about something, that usually tells us what our values are. And then if we can understand those values, obviously there's the massive benefit, which you'll all know about just understanding yourself in general. It makes you a bit easier to kind of manage and make your way through life. But we can also really tactically use them to prioritize and make decisions, and like I've really tried to do that later in life. And when opportunities come by, I think, does it meet this value? Do I enjoy learning? Am I going to learn something from it? What am I going to get from it? It's a really good way of like cross-referencing the things that you take on in life. And it really has genuinely helped me. Another way that it can be really interesting to think about values, because something that I've been getting quite recently, and I don't know if this is just a trend, but I've had a few of my recent coachees say to me, can you help me with my personal brand? Can you help me articulate what I stand for? And I think just as a society, we're becoming more values focused. Even just in the way that we consume goods and things, you'll see that we often think about what companies, the values of companies and the integrity companies have. And I think people are thinking a lot more about their personal brand and what that says about them. So I think values can be really, really fantastic exercises in helping people understand what their personal brand is. And so that especially when they're leaders, they can say what it is that they stand for.
Yeah. So when you were designing the cards and going through this process, apart from the excitement of creating Kickstarter campaign and seeing people kind of pledging their money, what was your vision about how people would use this tool in their work? Were you designing it for coaches, or were you primarily designing it for yourself and
So
yeah.
it's a couple of uses really. So I guess my first main audience was coaches or facilitators. So coaches who work either with individuals or with groups. I also wanted it to be a tool that anyone could use, which is why I've got, because coaches on this call, I could give you this, these cards, and you'll know what to do. You'll find your way with them, but that I got quite clear instructions in them, because I wanted someone who hadn't ever done that sort of self-development before to have something that they can use on themselves. And it's a nice tool. It's a nice kind of exercise. Obviously, you don't get the full benefit if you don't do it with someone else, because you have someone challenging you and asking the questions. But there is some self-coaching that you can do. So it is also a self-coaching tool. But I think it's something that you can use with teams as well. So there's those kind of three audiences there.
Yeah. So how might someone use them then in this kind of context? I suppose we have to focus on Deckhive particularly now, because that's what we can show people, and I guess increasingly people are working in this kind of way, aren't they now? So can you give us some examples of some things that you might do and that other people have found helpful?
Yeah, so one of my first starting points, and I think Michelle, we're going to here's one we prepared earlier table, is my starting point with these cards would be to get people to sort through all of the cards and put them into a kind of yes, no, maybe pile. Like, yes, this is something that's one of my values. Maybe this is one of my values, and no, I don't think this is one of my values. And when I say yes, no, maybe, what I mean is a key value. I mean, no one's going to kind of look at family and, or not, maybe you go, oh no, that's not a value for me. It's the strength and the the importance of these values. It's not, no, they're not values, just they're not some of my top values. So I'd get people to do a card sort into those piles. And you know what, there's so much data just in how people approach this. Really, it's really fascinating watching people, especially what one of the values is decisiveness. And sometimes I'll make a joke, if people have used decisiveness or not, having watched them decide. Some people will be very clear about what they want. Some people will have a massive maybe pile because they're not really decisive. So there's real mileage in just the process of doing it. And the reason why I have a maybe pile and not just a yes no pile is because I think people like, if you're a psychologist, you'll know people like the security in the middle box. But what you do then is after you've got them to do that pile, as long as you've got, well, it depends on how big your yes pile is, but I would immediately get people to take away the maybe and the no pile, and I put it to the side. So I think we've got a next table, so you focus on the yes, and that sometimes scares people because you've taken away their maybes. You've taken away that for them, so that's sometimes that kind of creates a conversation. And then what I'm trying to do, and there's no set rules about this, there's no sort of right or wrong, but I think that 5 is a really useful number of values. It's that something you can easily hold in your head, something you can remember, something you can easily work with. So I would, the aim then is to get people from their yes pile, which might be 8 we've got here, but it might be enormous. But the idea is to then narrow down into to get them to think about what their top 5 are. And there's a bunch of ways that you can do this, and you can just try them and see. So depending on how many you've got, like if you've got 8 here, I might just say rank them. And that can be a really first triage. So what's at the top and what's at the bottom, and if people are struggling with that, well, then you ask them questions about it. And the cards come with some instructions on questions, but you'll all be familiar with sort of questions. When was a time when you felt really happy, really, really secure, really confident, or what is there someone that you admire who has this value? What does this value mean? So really you're basically exploring what these values mean in order to get them to understand for themselves the meaning of these values and how they manifest for them. And this is where you might start to flip them over, Michelle. Like you might just flick some random ones over. You might say, well, tell me more about what this picture means to you. Does it help you at all? Does it help you articulate? And like I said earlier, the words aren't important. If they go, if they, there are 52 value words, but when I was researching this, you could get lists of thousands of value words. So if they say it's sort of this value, but actually the word is this, then I even toyed with having blank cards. I didn't in the end, but I'll certainly take post-it notes. And sometimes we'll substitute a value for a post-it note, because the words are really important to people, having the right word that means that's important to them.
Yeah. That's that ownership, isn't it, for them? It's kind of owning the process rather than being told by you about them.
Absolutely. And it, again, like I said, it's almost neither here nor no, it's not neither here nor there. A lot of the work is in the process and the conversation, not just the values that you come up with. So this is all really, really excellent. One of the things I did want to mention in this is that a conversation that you might have is about one value being in disguise of another. So I think some of the values that we've got here is we've got mastery, persistence, and excellence. And I just picked those out as I was thinking about this last night. I was thinking what sort of things have come up, and and I could go through these values, and another time I might pick different one. I might go, actually those are too similar, but there are real differences between some of these words, and people might not be able to articulate them straight away. So someone might pick persistence, or pick mastery, or pick excellence, and what they mean is one of the others. So I might the questions I might say to them, when they're looking at words like this is it about how other people see you? Or is it about not wanting to give up? Is it about achievement? Really starting to narrow down to see whether some of the values they've picked are actually disguised as another value, or a means to another value. So the value might be excellence, or master. The value might be, they might have said they want mastery, or they believe mastery is their value, but actually what they really want is achievement and excellence. And it's not their own mastery, it's how other people view them. So it's just really important to get under the skin of those things.
So once you've kind of been through that process, and you've narrowed down to the 5, and you've had the discussions, you've got a better understanding about what each of those mean for them, then what? Is that enough to have done that, or is there more that you would typically want to do?
So I think once you get, Michelle, is our last table, do we have 5 values? Yeah, so when you get to your values, you've had all the really great conversations to get people to understand them. Now you want to talk about, well, how do they show up? What do they mean? And then how can they use them? So you might have already started these conversations. It depends on the conversations you've had already. But you'd ask, what do the values mean to you? How do they show up? So get them to describe it. So you're asking them to provide their own evidence for it, because all they're doing is telling you what they think. And what you have to be really careful of when you're working with coachees is, again, like me, are they just saying the values they think they should have? When you're doing this card sort, everyone puts family, almost everyone puts family, and almost everyone puts family first because they think they should. But for some people, that genuinely isn't a driver for them. It genuinely isn't the thing that's core to them, and the thing that drives them. And that's completely okay. But one of the things you want to get under, because even once you get to these 5 values, you still might find you're going back and swapping them out and might not be the right ones. You want them to provide evidence for themselves that these are the right values for them, because they might still just be choosing the values they think they should be choosing. So questions like, how do they show up? How does it feel when you don't have it? We all know that stress responses are usually a really good indicator of things that are important to us. And there's a question there, are there any conflicts between your values? Because you do sometimes find that if you've got someone who has got family as a family and balance, we've got balance there as a top value, but then achievement is another value. Those things come in conflict. Here you've got mastery and variety, but those things can come into conflict because to master things, you quite often have to be quite single-minded at them. So if you want to be a master at something but you also like variety, how are those things going to conflict? And it doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means that that's going to make it hard for you to make decisions. So you just need to be aware of that. I mean, I'm a bit like that. I love variety. As you will have heard from my story, I like trying lots of different things, but I also like to be good at them. And so that, that really then comes in conflict. That could be really exhausting. So it's just, some of it's just being
Mm.
aware of them.
Yeah, fab. But yeah, I can see how that kind of process would add a lot of value because you're going quite deep there, aren't you? But how long would a session like that typically take?
It's a really great question, and it's how long's a piece of string? I mean, I would do this in a sort of like a 90-minute coaching session, but also remembering that it's a conversation you might come back to, because they might want to go away and reflect. It just depends how long it took to get here. It depends on where, you'll get some clients that come to you that are fairly self-aware. So the question isn't what are your values, it's how are you making them work for you. But if you spent such an awful lot of time on getting clients to understand their values, you might then want to defer the next conversation, which is, how do you use them? How can you practically use them?
Mm. So I'm just wondering whether you sometimes find that people are conscious of different values in different parts of their life. Does that ever come up as part of the
Absolutely,
conversation?
absolutely. And again, I haven't delved too much into the research on this, and I'm not sure how much research there is, because we're talking some real abstract notions here. But one of the conversations that we do have in the beginning, I should have said that, is that people say, well, do you mean at home or do you mean at work? And the answer is always whatever you need, whatever works for you, whatever's most important for you at the time. Because it might be that the values that you have at work are different to the values that you have at home. And that's an interesting enough conversation in itself. In a world where we're increasingly seeing an overlap between our work lives and our home lives, are these things going to come into conflict, or are we the same person at work as we are at home? um, or something that I find, that I've seen in some people. I think I find it in myself, and I've seen it when I've spoken to my friends about their husbands. I had a friend who is quite a really successful contractor for a consulting firm, and would go away for a week, and be a really impressive director, and come home to his wife, and she'd be like, oh, hi, can you take the recycling out? And that's real. There's that real difference in your home life compared to your work life, and sometimes just really important to understand what those differences are. And if you can say, no, in my work life, it's important that I'm seen as credible, or have mastery of these things, and leadership's important. But then you see these really strong leaders go home to their partners and become the completely less dominant partner. They're all great conversations, and you just
Mm.
never know what you're going to come up against.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like you've had lots of enjoyable, interesting conversations
Yeah, really have.
through the process. So, I guess one of the things that strikes me about this kind of deck is that there's a lot of versatility in it, isn't there? The simplicity of it means that there's many other ways besides what you've just talked through. So, are there other things that come to mind about different activities that either you've done or other people who've used your cards have used, which have worked well in different ways?
Yeah, and it's a really great question. I do want to say that, if you're thinking of designing your own tool, what we can kind of, whenever I've been involved in innovation, it's really easy to get sucked into trying to be something for everyone. So yes, versatility is really, really important, but that doesn't mean throwing everything at it. So my route to versatility was simplicity in these cards. So they do have a primary purpose, and you can use them for other things. The temptation might sometimes be to add another thing, add another layer, and add another layer to make it really versatile. But in doing so, you're losing its primary purpose. So I might just use these as a kind of check-in, either the words, because some people like words. I certainly am a real wordy person. Or you can use the pictures as a check-in. So, if you were running a workshop like this, you might just say, pick a picture that describes how you feel right now, or describes how you're feeling about this workshop. And then you just use it as a way of getting people to talk about it. And it doesn't matter whether it matches the word or anything like that. It's the picture or the word. It's the power of the conversations. I would use this in doing values exercises with teams, so not just in personal values. I would use it It's a really great exercise to use, and because it's so simple, you can use it with family and friends, and get them to start thinking about their values, which will help. If you can talk to your partner, or not your young children but your older children, about what's important to them, that can just make the world just so much more harmonious. So it's not so much using it in different ways apart from the check-in, but certainly using it in different contexts is, I think, is one of the versatility points of this card, this deck.
Thank you. So it'd be really good to find out if there are other questions from anybody else who's joined us today. So if you have a question, feel free to either unmute or just type it into the chat, and we can see if we can cover off anything else. We have a few more minutes available to do that. But while people are thinking of questions, Kathryn, I'm wondering where they might be able to get hold of a deck. If where would they get hold of you and get hold of a deck if they wanted a physical version? Because obviously they can come to deckhive.com to use the digital version.
Yeah, definitely. So the Deckhive is really great. Now we've moved to a much more online world. Having a platform like Deckhive is really fantastic. So you can use them on there. On my Deckhive profile, there's a link to my website as well, so you can get a real life. And they're just the size of a pack of cards, so they're the sort of thing you can just chuck in your bag. So you can do that. And I'm a one-woman operation. I have a box of these under my bed, and I'll get an email from you, and I'll stick it in a jiffy bag and write the address by hand.
And when you get the deck in person, you mentioned some guidelines and instructions that come with it. So they're in the box, are they?
Yeah, they're just part of the deck. There's cards, really sort of brief instructions for teams, sort of start here, and just a little bit of an about and what to do next. So those are all there, but those are all part of the Deckhive pack. Not on the pack on here, but on the landing page.
Yeah, so there's, as you say, once you've got the deck available in Deckhive, then there are extra resources at the bottom of that deck page where you can find guides and so on, which will give you a bit more information. So Sassy has a question. Have you used the cards with global teams, variety of cultures and values? And if yes, any interesting insights?
I haven't personally, no, because I don't work globally in this sort of role, but it's really, really fantastic question, and I would be really fascinated. And do you know what? There'll be loads of research out there on values and cultural values, and even how organizational values shape us as well. So there'll be loads of research, but I haven't personally experienced that. But it's a really great question.
And Samira's asking about the process you went through from shortlisting down from the potential thousands of words you could have used. How did you get to the 52?
I mean, I'll not lie. When people say things on the back of an envelope, when I ran my Kickstarter, and one of the things about Kickstarter is you really show behind the scenes of how you're developing. People really like that. And there's a picture of a large A4 envelope. I can't remember what it was used for. And there's like about 100 value words scribbled on there where I started my triage process. So basically, I just went and saw a lot of the tools that are at the online lists that are out. And just started deduping them, because a lot of them were words that meant the same. I took out some words that seemed a bit sort of esoteric. So there wasn't, I won't lie, there wasn't a science behind it, but there was instinct backed by years of education, I would like to say. Yeah. And I also tested it. I beta tested it with friends and family as well.
Yeah, it's an important part of the process, isn't it?
Yeah, honesty and authenticity. Yeah, some values there for me. Honesty and authenticity.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute if you'd rather ask in the old-fashioned way. I don't know, Michelle. Maybe you've got any others, but
I have a question, if I may.
Of course, yeah, Julia, carry on.
Thank you. I'm interested in what you said about family being a value, Kathryn, that's always chosen, because it's always struck me as a bit of an anomaly to have family, because A, it's very hard not to choose it, but B, we don't put work on there, or we don't put hobbies on there. So I've always been interested in that value of family and what it means. And what do you get in that conversation? Does it tend to come into the last five, or do people say, because I think family is maybe about love or loyalty, or I don't know what, but I'm just wondering what's underneath it when you explore it.
Well, and that's the beauty about this exercise and the cards as well, is because what you do find is sometimes what I found when I've done these exercises is you get a sort of tree effect. a hierarchy. So where you where you say the word family and you say love, and I can't remember the other words you use, and those might be things under your tree. Someone might get something really different from the word family, like they might get security and reliability. And so it's just really genuinely really interesting to, you're right, I mean, if I were to do it again, would I take the word family out? Possibly, because it can be confounding, and again it comes back to this kind of everyone's going to put it, but then I also didn't want to assume that it is a value, you know, because you could say, well, surely family is a fundamental value for everyone, but I also didn't want to make that assumption. So yes, sometimes it can be confounding when you're picking values, and it can really cause some people to question themselves. What does it mean to, what does it say about me if I don't put family at the top of my list? But there's the work, right? There's some of the data. So I think it would be interesting to take it out. It's interesting leaving it in, but you're right. Having some of those kind of like trees of values in the words, they can, the value words can help you interpret other values, if that makes sense, and really get under the skin. Because actually sometimes, you know, like I said before, you've had a card like persistence and mastery and gone, no, actually it isn't that, it's this that I need. So it's not the family that's important to me, it's the security that's important to me, and that's my top value rather than family. But I'm always really clear that it doesn't mean any of this stuff isn't important to you, it's just not a real key driver for you.
And Rebecca's made a good point there about some clients choosing family to actually mean their extended family, not their sort of traditional family, but more about community and togetherness with.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you can see why I really didn't want to put definitions on these, because you just completely get in the way of people if you put definitions around these. They've got to define them for themselves.
Yeah. Okay, well, should we leave it there? Ivy has a question, so we squeeze one more in.
I was just about to say they're fantastic, because I use them with our students at the Recovery College, and we use them in our Connect groups. And when we look at the processes of recovery, one of the key elements being empowerment and connection. When we're looking at that, we get our students to look at the things that they value. And obviously, when we talk, like you've talked about family, for some of our students, family can be something triggering. So it's not good memories, whereas for others, that's where they gain their security. So as you said, it's so important to get them to define what it means for them, and then get them to open up the conversation that way.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes having the words there, because sometimes I find that our clients struggle when you ask them what their values are, but once they can see the words, then they connect to the words, and then it opens up that conversation. So we found them very helpful.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so glad. That's exactly right. I mean, not everyone likes a kind of blank sheet of paper. So having the words in front is really important, but I think they're flexible enough that if 52 of these words don't work for you, you know, you can cross them out and write other words on them. You know, it's really fine for that too.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Kathryn, for being so open and honest in your sharing, and so practical in the things that you've shared with us. It's great to kind of see these examples. And I guess in closing, just want to highlight that we have a number of other sessions like this in our series. This is the second one that we've recorded, but we have others coming up featuring other card decks in the weeks and months to come. So we hope that we'll see some of you again for some of those other sessions. If you have any other questions after this session for us or for Kathryn, then I'm sure we'd be very happy to connect with you and to answer those.
Thanks for everyone's interest as well. I'm really delighted. So thank you. And I've got contact details on my webpage if you want to contact me any further.
Well, thank you. Well, yeah, thanks again. And thanks to all of you for joining us, and hope you have a good rest of the day.